what we're seeing every year for us is that a higher percentage of leads are coming in from SMS and chat than were previously just picking up the phone. Younger people like texting. They text a heck of a lot more than they call. They do type messages in chat or other platforms, whereas the older generation are using the phone more. So what we're seeing is that every year, a higher percentage of our leads do that. So if you're not giving your prospects the ability to send you a text message to start a conversation, you're immediately losing out on leads.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. And on today, we have a special guest. My guest, Ted DeBettencourt, is somebody you're really going to want to listen to. He is the owner of a company called Juvo Leads. And a little bit about him. He is a third-generation Martha's Vineyard native who has been in legal marketing for 12 years after having earned his JD and MBA from Case Western Reserve. Before he started Juvo Leads, he actually ran a legal marketing agency in Boston. And from that experience handling SEO and PPC, he got into the world of chatbots, ultimately by having his clients install them on their websites and finding that the chats were just not chatting. It was not a good experience. And his clients started actually losing clients because of the flaws in chat bots. And so he decided that he was going to move into the world of chat bots, not bots. You'll see what we mean when we talk about that on today's episode. And he ultimately went from just being one person answering for a few law firms to having well over 100 chat agents answering for 1,100 firms across the country. So he has really experienced massive growth, but he has a very interesting philosophy about growth and about using AI and automation and humans and where there's an intersection between the two. So we talk a lot about AI on this podcast. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation that we had today. And so without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, everybody. Ted DeBettencourt, welcome to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast.
Awesome, Allison. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. You're talking about one of the sweet spots for the podcast. We talk a lot about marketing. It's one of the sexy topics that lawyers love to dive into. And I know you're an expert at this because we have gotten a lot of information on you and about what you specialize in. But one of the things I'm really curious about, you got your company name in the background, Juvo Leads. So tell us a little bit about Juvo Leads and the inspiration for it, because you got some real life world experience I think is really interesting as a founder.
Thank you. Yeah. So Juvo Leads, we're a human-powered chat service. So basically how it works is someone goes on one of our clients' websites, we pop up and have a real conversation with that prospect, and we qualify that prospect and turn it into a leads. In an AI world, we still use humans. Our motto is butts, not bots. That's butts in the seat, not bots in the cloud. Real people answering chats 24/7, 365. And how we got started is I had a small legal marketing agency up in Boston. I was doing SEO, PPC, and content for about 5 to 10 law firms up there. And I started using some of the other chat services that were on the market. I liked what they were doing because they were getting some good leads from my firms, but they kept screwing up the chats. They were saying the wrong things, doing the wrong things, rejecting good leads, and it was driving my firms crazy. And they were yelling at me about it. And I was going, all right, well, I like what they're doing, but like, I don't want to keep getting yelled at for these bad chats. So I kept telling the chat companies, hey guys, can you guys make some changes here? Like do this, do that. Don't reject good leads. And they said, yeah, sure, Ted, we'll make those changes. But lo and behold, none of those changes happened. So I got pretty frustrated and just ended up firing them. But I liked what the chat was doing. So I said, all right, well, why don't I try to do it myself? So I got some, cheap do-it-yourself chat software, put them on the websites. And when I did that, my firm's leads went up about 50%. So I said, oh, wow, maybe I'm onto something here. So at first I tried to sell it as like an add-on to my agency services. But what would happen is I'd talk to these law firms and they said, Ted, I don't want to buy your SEO, but this chat thing, this sounds pretty interesting. Can I just do that? And I was like, well, that's not the point, but all right, yeah, let's I'll take what I can get. So we started with me answering chats for about, 5 to 10 firms in Boston. And then we started offering it as a standalone. And now we're up to about 1,100 firms around the country.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, that market growth obviously shows, how much a superior product you were offering. But, when you talk about the product itself, it's the chat. So what was wrong with the chat? Like when you were firing these companies, like what was the deficit that you found in their version versus what you improved upon?
One thing that was driving me crazy is every time I get a chat set up, because bear in mind, this was 2015, 2016. So still the majority of users were coming from desktop. But every year, my percent of users that came from mobile went up. And, now for most law firm websites, 81% of their leads come from people using a mobile device. Back then, it was still only about 23%. So one of the things they were doing was chat was taking up the whole website. So a mobile, to call the firm, you would have to close chat if they let you and move chat out of the way. So it was actually hurting my phone numbers, because if you have to move the chat to make a phone call, then you're not really helping. You're just cannibalizing leads. So that was the first thing. And then on the chat scripting side, the chats would take too long. They would say the wrong things. They would use one template for all my firms. And, I had some firms that were doing PI and bankruptcy and family law, and other firms that were doing immigration. So what you say to a PI prospect is going to be vastly different than what you say to an immigration firm or immigration prospect. So they would always just say the same thing. And it was like, well, no, I need you to ask these questions. What happened? Where was the accident? Who got hurt? How bad were the injuries? And they just weren't doing it, or they'd say it in a really robotic way. They'd fumble the chat. And then sometimes they would have, I had one instance where I had a truck accident in the state with injuries. I don't think it was a death, but it was serious injuries. Someone was taken out, medevaced out, and the chat agent got confused and said, "Oh, we don't want this lead." That was like $1 million case for my client. So I heard about this to no end. So I almost lost the client over it. I'm like, it's not my fault. I ran it by you to hire him. But at the end of the day, I was catching flack for it. And I get it. It's $1 million case. Mm-hmm. So I said, all right, well, this can't happen. So when they started making mistakes like that, there was no excuse. We had to get rid of them. So that was kind of the inspiration to try it myself.
Yeah. So the chat obviously is the starting point, right? People enter the chat and the goal is to get them to convert. And so the website conversion is really the point. That's what the person is aiming for.
We are. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about website conversion. So when you get people into the chat and they start engaging, the prospect is going and you're trying to get them to take action. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you actually see firms making when it comes to converting web visitors into actual leads or clients?
Great question. So the number one thing is not building rapport. So there's a lot of AI chatbots out there, and people can tell they're chatting, they don't try to pretend they're human. It's more like filling out a form. And what happens is when you don't show that white glove service, when you give people the impression that they're just on a conveyor belt, you're not getting as much engagement than when you use a real person. So we still use real people. It costs a heck of a lot more than AI. But by doing that, we're able to, when someone comes to our websites and they say, help, I was in a car accident, someone died, I don't know what to do. We're not going to say, give me your name, give me your phone number. We're going to say, I can't believe what you're going through. That sounds horrible. We're going to talk to them like we're talking to somebody in real life, because that's what the white glove service that people need. When firms have these great reputations for really caring for their clients, but they put them on a conveyor belt to start that interaction, they're not really shining forth as a firm that really cares about them. So by giving that white glove service and showing that we really care about the prospects, we're able to build a lot more rapport with those prospects, give them a much better first impression for the firm. So that chat lead turns into a case at a much higher rate than if they were just on a conveyor belt.
Yeah. So that first impression really is critical. In fact, we talk about that first 5 minutes, right? That first 5 minutes is the crucial time period where you either capture or you alienate. And that's something that a lot of firms don't spend enough time on. So when you talk about, and when you think about that first 5 minutes, I want you to, walk me through intake, right? So, the chatbot is the way that we get them over to a human to talk to our firm, and we get them into the intake system. But from that perspective, whether it's human or AI, how can law firms actually structure their intake systems to make better use of those lead opportunities that come from the chatbots?
Well, let me challenge that a little bit. So what we're seeing every year for us is that a higher percentage of leads are coming in from SMS and chat than were previously just picking up the phone. Younger people like texting. They text a heck of a lot more than they call. They do type messages in chat or other platforms, whereas the older generation, self included, I don't text as much as most people, are using the phone more. Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is that every year a higher percentage of our leads do that. So if you're not giving your prospects the ability to send you a text message to start a conversation, you're immediately losing out on leads. So giving them the ability to text is one thing. Two, I'm going to challenge the assumption a little bit more and say the goal of chat is to get them into intake. what we're seeing is that every year an increased number of people want to go through with their full intake right via chat, via text, or in the platform they chose to communicate with the firm with. So if a person starts a chat, maybe they're at work and they're starting a chat, they're not ready for a phone call, but they have a matter that we can help them with. We will literally get a retainer sign right then and there for them. So we're taking that lead further because people are choosing to communicate with us in the channel chat or text, whereas previously they would just pick up the phone. So we can take that lead a little bit further than a lot of chat companies by getting retainer signed right through them. We don't force them to do it. We'll always transfer it for a phone call, but we give them the option because maybe they're at work and they can't do this on the phone because their boss will see, but we can do it with them in the channel they choose to communicate with us.
Now, is that more in personal injury than other areas? Because I would imagine, we do recommend that people have paid consultations, especially in those areas where there's a longer buy cycle. But with personal injury, because contingency is something that a lot of people aren't even paying costs.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's probably easier to get a signed retainer agreement in those types of cases than in some of the hourly or flat fee case types.
Yeah. So criminal law, we always transfer it to a phone call. What we're doing more and more for estate planning, bankruptcy, and family law is we're booking consultations. So we always try to transfer it to a phone as well. So what we'll do is anything we can do to stop the prospect from shopping to another firm. Because what we see is that when we transfer it to a phone call, a lot of firms are great and they pick up the phone right away 100% of the time. A lot of times they don't though. So if we transfer it to a phone call and they don't pick up, well, now the chatter is a little bit frustrated. Hey, I thought someone was going to call me back right away. It took a day. So if we can take that lead a step further and say, you know what, I'd love to schedule some time with attorney Bill, attorney Sally, whatever it is, so she can talk to you more and learn more about your case. Do you have time available on Tuesday at 3 or Wednesday at 4? We'll book them. That will stop them from firm shopping. But then we also call the firm as well, connect them that way. But it's just one more way to take that lead a little bit further so they don't possibly find another firm.
Yeah. So taking it further it seems like is really the core. Like you want to get them as far as you can to client, so that they don't, like you said, shop for other firms.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm wondering about now is, we had this kind of big explosion in June when the LSAs ultimately changed their scope of service and started telling us that they own our data. If they are on a recorded line, that's their information to use as we will. So a lot of lawyers are now skittish about LSAs. But for those that are still using them, and I don't think that the product has had a huge drop off, I am curious about the connection between chatbots and LSAs. So when we think about the LSA driving inbound leads, how can the chatbot facilitate actually using an LSA to be able to convert a lead?
Great question. So we're chatbots, not chatbots, but how we do LSA, and we do LSA message answering for our clients. So I'm not going to justify any of Google's actions for how they're using that data, because it's actually not only they're using the data, but they're doing something a little bit more nefarious as well. So when there's two calls to action in LSA, people can click a button and call, or they can send a message. When they send a message, after the user hits submit to firm one, they have the option to send that same message to 3 other firms. Google is charging 4 firms for one message. Very sneaky on their part. But because they're making 4 times the amount of money on those, what they do is they make the number one ranking factor in LSA is message response time. So when you answer messages fast in LSA, Google puts your ad at the highest, not always the highest, depending on who else is doing it, higher in the ranking. So if you go to your LSA listings, if you click see more firms, you can see the ones that are at the top and the ones that are at the bottom. The ones that are at the top always have this little badge, typically replies in a few minutes. Those are the firms that Google will rank high in LSA. The ones that have messaging off or have slow response time, Google doesn't show their ads as much. So we see a really have and have nots world with LSA. The firms that reply to messages fast and the ones that don't. And here's why message response time is so important. A lot of firms respond fast, but you have to be the first to respond, because if you don't, if it takes you 5 minutes to respond and it takes the competitor 1, they're going to be on the phone with the leads before you can even chat with them. Mm-hmm. And then even worse on top of that, Google is now passing through the phone number as not the real prospect's phone number. They're passing through an extension. So if you don't call that number first, Google will disconnect that number for you. So what we do is when we're logged into our client's account 24/7, 365, When a message comes in, we have a little trick to get their real phone number so we never show the extension. And then as soon as we get that phone number, we're not going to message back and forth with the LSA sender. We're going to call the firm. We're going to say, hey, you got a new LSA lead. Press 1 to call them right away. As soon as they press 1, they call the prospect to get on the phone with them instantly. What we do is we give our firms about a 3 to 5 minute head start on every LSA lead that comes in so they can beat the competitors to the leads. Not only are they taking their leads and defending them against the competitors from calling them, but they're taking leads that were originally sent to the competitors and calling them first. So if you're not doing LSA message answering, you need to because you're going to rank higher. And then always make sure you respond. You're the fastest in your market to respond, or you're going to have your leads taken by the competition.
Wow. That's actually quite scary if you think about it, but it's also horrible. Quite empowering because one of the things that we talk a lot about is response time. And when we do secret shopping for law firms, they find, oh yeah, my team is great at responding right away. And it takes 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, or the call just rings and rings and rings and rolls over to an answering service that does that same, even though it's a live human at an answering service following a script, and it feels very conveyor belt like. So you're definitely capitalizing on something that we have been talking about for years with our clients at Law Firm Mentor. Let's talk a little bit about quality control, because, if you are on the firm side and you are working with a company like yours, chat butts, not butts, and you're helping to get people into that funnel. One of the things I think is a real problem is for law firms that are trying to use more AI and automation, they struggle between when should I be using a human and when should I be using an automated system or an AI generated tool. So how does Juvo Leads actually ensure that automation actually enhances and doesn't harm the quality of legal intake? Like where does your role fit in either advising the firm or in fitting with what is already an automated system in a particular law firm?
So we like to say the proof is in the pudding. So how our service works, we're a human-powered answering service. So there were AI chat companies, there are AI phone answering companies. If you can show me a legit firm that has fired their intake team and went over to all AI, I'll show you a firm that's going to fail. There are no firms doing that. There are after-hour services that are better than voicemails for sure. But if you want to fire your phone intake team and say, hey, we're going to have the AI do it solely, you're going to have a little bit of trouble and you're not going to convert as many people. The same right now is true for chat. Right, chat's going to evolve to a hybrid model where it's half AI, half human. But the minute you get rid of humans entirely, you're going to have a bad time. But we don't ask firms to trust us on that. We ask firms to trust their data. So what we do is every time we go live with a site, if they're using another chat, we say, all right, give us a split test. I don't want to win your business. I want to prove to you that we can get you more leads by using people. So we go live with a site, we'll do an A/B split test, or we'll go live for free for 30 days. And if we do a split test, we say, all right, using your AI chat, let's see how many leads you get in the next 30 days. We'll give it to them for free. And then after that 30-day free trial, we say, who got you more leads? Who got you more cases? We always get more leads and more cases.
Yeah. So I think it's one of these things where I don't think that people do trust data enough. And I think that's a large part because they aren't tracking data, right? So we tell people all the time, like, you can't fix something unless you know what to fix. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of times lawyers just say, I've got 10 problems, I'm just going to fix them all at once. And then you might get to a better result. But of course, you don't know if it was the first fix or the fifth fix or the seventh fix or the 10th fix or the combination of all of them. Yeah. So definitely working with a professional that can tell them, like, how do we isolate for the one area where we're going to be changing? The split test is on one variable, can really give them a powerful answer to, is it company A or is it company B?
Well, I'll say yes and no. So we try our best to lean on the data and we can pull our raw data. I can't tell you how many times we look at data and a firm says, well, we just had an A/B split test and then we got 60% more leads. And then when we sat down with the person that analyzed leads, the intake manager said to me, Ted, I don't know why this is a split test. You got more leads. I thought a split test means you both get the same amount of leads. I was like, oh no, that's not what a split test means. Like it was very painful. And so we often rely on the intelligence of the firm to understand what a split test is. Sometimes we overestimate law firms when we have to rely on that data. So we can always provide the data. show them what it means, extrapolate it, and break it down. But it is always a challenge to lean strictly on the data for a lot of businesses which aren't data centric.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's the conundrum that all business owners have, right? To a certain degree, you can lead a horse to water, but if they're not educated enough to drink, you can only do so much here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing I want to talk a little bit about is the future of legal intake. So I know that one of the things that I've seen from just following you on social media and on LinkedIn in particular is that, you're very future forward in your company and in your ideology around AI. And so one of the things that I contemplate a lot, we talk a lot about AI on the podcast, and AI and humans interacting can be a great synergy, a great growth opportunity, but oftentimes lawyers fear that AI will cannibalize in the profession. And so when we think about AI and human intake evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, where do you think it's headed? Like, just kind of pontificate for us.
Sure, more AI. I mean, even now, if a firm ever has a phone go to voicemail, like, you're doing something wrong. There are solutions in place that are backups for not going to a person. Right now, AI isn't as good as a person answering the phone, but it's very challenging to have a person answer the phone, speak perfectly, act perfectly, say all the right things, and pick up the phone after 3 rings. But if you aren't at that level, and not a ton of firms are, there are solutions in place on the phone side to be able to pick up that gap. So you should be able to have a second place option for those phone calls that go to voicemail. On the chat side, the same thing. We're right now all human. It's going to be a hybrid model in the future. So AI and human working together to make sure you're doing the right thing and saying the right thing. At some point, it's going to be more AI than human. But right now, you can still tell when you're chatting with AI. And it's good in the beginning of a chat, but as it gets further down the chat and you have all these variables you're running with, AI isn't very good at following the variables to date. Or at least the ones, we're using, all the ones everyone else is using. Yeah. At some point it will be, but as of right now, not quite yet.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think is, thank you for sharing that, because I think that when we talk about AI, there's either an over-reliance or an under-reliance. Yes. You have the laggards, the skeptics, that say, it's the den of all evil. Let's stay away from it. And then you have the people that say, okay, great. I'll just fire all my associates and all of my drafting will be done by this computer thing. And there is a process of learning how to prompt your AI chatbot, how to engage with it, how to train it. And that's one of the things that I think companies like yours that are on the cutting edge are definitely going to make use of and certainly make your business better for it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the firms that don't overdo it, but don't underdo it as well. So it's hard to say in that cusping on that cusp without going too far, because we see a lot of ones that go too far. It's not the worst thing in the world when the firms go too far. If we're working with them and they'll say like, hey, we want to try this AI one. All right, give it a shot. If they rely on the data, like, we know we're going to win them back. If they just want to stay ahead of the curve because that's like the trendy thing that people are talking about at conferences, it's hard to win that back. But if you lean on the data, you can see that if you use AI as an assistant, not a replacement, you can go far. But if you try to rip everything out, root and stem, you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah. Assistant and not replacement, I think, is key. And then, of course, like you said, butts, not bots.
Butts, not bots. Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Ted, for coming on to the podcast. This has been great. I love learning about new companies. And when we found your company and saw some of the great things that you were doing at the epicenter of humans and AI, I was just really impressed. So thank you for being a guest. Let everybody know where to find you and anything you'd like to share about Juvo Leads.
Sure. If you're interested in Juvo Leads, we give everyone a free 30-day trial. If you want to try us, go to Juvo, Juvo Leads.com and start a chat on our website.
All right. Sounds good. Again, thank you, Ted DeBettencourt, for coming on to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I am Allison Williams, your host, and we will see you on our next episode.